In recent months, there have been some actions by Ghanaians and the Ghanaian authorities in Ghana against Nigerians that have been considered by the Nigerian authorities as hostile and harassing. Now, this instigated statement from the Nigerian Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, on the 28th of August, making strong allegations that the Ghanaian authorities have been breaching the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties in an international agreement regulating treaties between states. It was signed by 45 countries, which includes Nigeria and Ghana. So we earlier published a video about the statement of the Nigerian Minister of Information saying that the country will no longer tolerate unfriendly actions by Ghana. Well, the link of the video has been provided down below, so you can watch the video to find out more on that. But for now, let's take an historical perspective at the diplomatic relationship between Nigeria and Ghana for almost a century and find out where the issue all started. Perhaps the most popular phrase that comes to your mind is the Ghana must go phrase that strongly suggests that Nigeria many years ago chased out Ghanaians from their country. But what is the truth behind the story? Well, it may surprise you that it all dates as far back as the early 20th century, even before the Ghana must go saga. The earliest repulsion captured during modern history between both countries was in 1932, but before then, Nigerians had been well established in Ghana and had contributed immensely to the socio-economic development of Ghana before and after independence. It was believed that Nigerians constituted the largest single group of immigrants resident in Ghana as of 1931. 3 decades from then, more Nigerians kept going into Ghana, seeing how well they thrived as traders, cocoa farmers, farm laborers and farm contractors, factory workers as well as menial workers in construction sites. The population of Nigerians in Ghana increased geometrically from 57,400 in 1931 to 191,802 in 1963. In 1932, during the cocoa hold-up crisis, the Nigerian cocoa farmers in Akufo-Addo, Ghana, opposed the local cocoa hold-up led by the king of the town against the European firms. This instigated a far-reaching resolution of the town at a meeting at Ghanian in 1935. Then, the traditional council urged the colonial government to ensure that troublemakers, that's referring to the migrants, were kept out of Akufo-Addo. The resolution reads as follows. Ghanian considers that it is now time that the people from Nigeria and other places should be made amendable to the customary laws of the various states in which they reside, and that any act of insubordination on the part of any such strangers should, with the sanction of government, be punished by deportation. As a follow-up to the above resolution, local business people in the town formed the National Crusade for the Protection of Ghanaian Enterprise, which opposed the foreign entrepreneurs. The Ghanaian indigenes began raising concerns about a large number of Nigerians in their country, and they often blamed immigrants, particularly Nigerians, for the country's economic instability, which intensified in the late 1960s. The migrants were the first set of people to lose their jobs as the hardship persisted. That the government decided to introduce several intervention policies aimed essentially at controlling the number of immigrant population and restricting the exercise of certain activities by non-nationals. One of such policies, Alien Compliance Order of 18th November 1969, which affected some migrants from other West African countries such as Togo, Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast, of which the majority of the victims were Yorubas from southwestern Nigeria, numbering about 140,000 out of an estimate 191,000 Nigerian immigrants stock in Ghana then. In 1958, Nigeria struck oil as a young, soon-to-be-liberated country with a population of 100 million. First Shell, then Mobil, and Ajib set up shop in the country to drill oil commercially. The oil money was steady and hopes were high that Nigeria could prosper despite the brutal military regimes that marred that period. In the 1970s, the economy exploded when oil prices soared worldwide. The golden decade had arrived and the country became Africa's wealthiest, securing its title, Giant of Africa. In 1974, Nigeria's oil wells were spitting out some 2.3 million barrels a day. The standard of living improved. There was an influx of people from the farms to the cities. When they traveled, Robust iron boxes were generally preferred over cheap plastic sacks. The influx came not just from within Nigeria, but from across the region. During the 1960s, Ghana was the world's largest producer of cocoa, but the country was going through a lot of economic hardship because that was around the time the price of cocoa crashed. At that time, Ghana was close to a failed state, so some of the over 7 million Ghanaians decided to move to Nigeria in search of greener pasture. Recruiters from Nigeria came to Ghana looking for people who would like to teach or to take casual jobs. And those were jobs that most Nigerians themselves then were unwilling to do. So they came in their numbers through Lome and Togo, and then onward through the semi-border between Nigeria and the Republic of Benin, and arrived in Lagos determined more than ever to make it in the country. Primary and secondary schools were filled with Ghanaian teachers, law offices, shoe repair shops, ice cream parlors, restaurants and brothels were also full of Ghanaians. By 1983, Nigeria already had about 1 million Ghanaians in the country, most of which were undocumented immigrants. And then came the oil crash. Global oil prices started to dip in 1982 when large consumer markets such as the United States and Canada slipped into recession and demand was low. By 1983, the price of a barrel had fallen to $29, down from $37 in 1980. At around the same time, the US began producing its oil, further cutting demand and causing excess supply. Consequently, Nigeria, whose economy was almost exclusively reliant on oil, was hit very hard. By 1982, 90% of the country's foreign reserve had been wiped out, according to the Washington Post. Food prices skyrocketed and salaries became erratic. Nigerian politicians started to blame African migrants, especially Ghanaians, for the failed economy. There were even stories of Ghanaians being physically harassed. And in 1983, Shehu Shagari, president of Nigeria, declared the expulsion of an estimated 2 million undocumented migrants living in the country. Rumors spread that the government had ordered locals to beat up any illegal Ghanaian still in the country by the January 31 deadline. And that was the time when the blue and red checked bags, which came in big and medium sizes, became the most sought after bag by Ghanaians because they were big and spacious and sturdy enough for long travel. The borders were a disaster, crammed with desperate people carrying chairs to make money to pay for fares that had doubled. Millions streamed out through any possible exits they could find, through Shaki in western Nigeria to northern Benin, down south at the semi-border in Lagos, and many were eventually killed by stampede. Dozens were loaded on top of trucks headed for Ghana. But unfortunately, Jerry Rawlings, Ghana's military head of state, had ordered the borders with Togo closed to desist coup plotters and insurgents, and this meant that there was no passage for days. In response, Togo closed its borders with Benin to avoid a refugee crisis. Cars stalled bumper to bumper from the Benin-Togo border to Lagos, with people caught in sweltering heat and without water. Disease spread, and the United States prepared to send in aid. The League of Red Cross Societies airlifted 500 tents, 10,000 blankets, and thousands of buckets, according to the Washington Post. The deportees suffered, and the humanitarian issue led to the death of some. Later on, Ghana opened its borders to let its long-gone citizens back into the country. A year later, General Buhari also expelled some 700,000 Ghanaians. And that was how the historic Ghana Must Go story came to play. Interestingly, towards the beginning of the 21st century, a lot of Nigerians started going back to Ghana just to find a means of livelihood as the economic condition in Nigeria began getting worse. But let's not forget that a lot of Nigerians were deported from Ghana between 1957 and 1961 for political reasons. Under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, pressures for the expulsion of aliens from the country were initially repulsed by the Ghanaian government until on the 23rd August 1957 when the Convention People's Party (CPP) government passed the Deportation Act, which made it legal for the government to expel all foreigners who were deemed a threat to the nation. At that time, a couple of Nigerians were deported from Ghana, but in 1969, A mass expulsion of Nigerians from Ghana began, and the expulsion order affected close to 200 aliens from Togo, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria. And it is estimated that over 100,000 Nigerians were deported at that time, the majority of whom were Nigerians. So we can fairly say that it has been a tit for tat between Nigeria and Ghana. Do you think the acts of deportation by both countries in the past is responsible for the diplomatic issues we are having today? And do you see both countries forgetting about the past real soon and living with each other in peace and harmony? Let us know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button to get notified anytime we upload a new video. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.